Good morning and welcome to Behind the Screen. I am JM, your guide, your interpreter, your game design insight. This is Behind the Screen where we sit around, we talk about games, we talk about things that we love, we talk about moments of beauty that we get from gaming. That can be game design topics, that can be reviews, that can be talking about campaigns, which we're going to do a little bit today, and that can also be part of a series that we're talking about. And so today I'm continuing this series called An Argument for Alignment. And if you didn't go check out the first one, you should probably stop here and go over to our YouTube channel and check out the first one, because these are going to kind of build on each other. So today we're going to be talking about playing an alignment and why that's important. And in the first part of this series, we talked about the origins of alignment. And it was brought to my attention that I used a term that needs a little bit more definition. I said that in fantasy games, especially those of the Dungeons and Dragons, D20, F20, if you want to use Pelgrane's term for it, fantasy 20 games, that alignment is actually an ontological reality of the world. And what I mean by that is that the idea of alignment, the reality of lawful good, chaotic neutral, neutral evil, that these points on the map are baked into the very essence of being. They are fundamental to the nature of everything in the world. Certified Organic and I were chatting about it, that the idea that, in these games, the gods who are the aspects of these alignments, right, the personification, if we want to take a Gloranthan term, sort of the expression of the runes, that the gods are expressions of their alignment. For in a fantasy world, in a pre-enlightenment world, there is no real distinction between what a god is and how they act. Essence and action are inexorably linked. That they would create the mortal races in their own image, and they would create the mortal races for a purpose, for a telos, to go back to some ancient philosophical ideas, like telos being your purpose on this world. And so we have this idea that we've had this kind of intrusion of it's a weird, there's a bifurcation between, we want to play in a fantasy world, which is awesome, but we also want to kind of cling to kind of modern separations of these things. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle with alignment comes in. They see that as being a rejection of kind of where we're at today. But I think that's part of the beauty of playing in heroic fantasy or epic fantasy games, is that we get to step away from the modern world. And so it's weird to me. So one of the things that is starkly exemplifies this point is in Pathfinder. I love Golarion. I think it is a great campaign setting, save for one thing: the nation of atheists. It makes no sense to me. And every time you try to read through that section, it definitely feels like they are trying to hammer a octahedron into a circle, not even a square peg into a circle. We're talking about somehow this nation has become so convinced that there are no gods. Like, I don't understand it. Why doesn't Saranway just show up? She manifests other places in the world, but it's this conceit to sort of the modern man's mindset. Yes, certified organic philosophy and logic versus pantheon theology. I would even argue that philosophy tends to fall more into The second category, I would say maybe humanist materialism versus philosophy, pantheism, and theology. So we're talking about the breaking down and kind of the purpose next time. But this time we're going to talk about playing a character. So one of the things I hear a lot about is that alignment is a restriction. And you know what? It is. But it's a bug. It's not a bug, it's a feature. Alignment is used as a shorthand in your games to say, this is what side of this great conflict, this great war between ideas. I think Planescape took these ideas and put them at the forefront, put them right in the center where I think they belong. Where do I stand in this conflict? Because at the core of our heroic fantasy experience is the idea of trying to make the world a better place, trying to stop the big bad evil guy, trying to make sure that our side, whether that's our player group, whether that's the larger things that we align with, is successful. I mean, look at even the great modern campaigns that have been turned into animated shows. There's a reason why people show up and still refer to the first Critical Role game as being so good, because it had this purpose, this telos, this idea of that the adventuring party is trying to stop the Chroma Conclave, the Briarwoods, Vecna, because they were heroes and were trying to stop evil from taking over their world. We'll get to the idea of playing evil characters in a bit. But I think when we get this division in here, things start to break down. If we don't understand why alignment is important, and we see it only as something that limits our character, I think we're looking at it wrong. One of my favorite sayings that I encountered at a very formative time is that for slavery to the compass, I have freedom of the sea. What does that mean? Well, basically, by putting myself under into slavery by following the compass, I can go anywhere on the sea. By putting bounds on my creativity, I'm forced to work within something, and I'm forced to dig deeper as opposed to go wider. I love working within a box. I don't find it restrictive. I like knowing the limits. When I'm writing a Deadlands game, I know what the rules and the constraints of the setting are. And so I won't go as far as to say that alignments are restrictive, the mindset that alignments are restrictive are equal to the that's what my character would do arguments. But I do tend to find that a lot of people at my table who are saying alignment alignment are restrictive and I don't want to play an alignment, tend to be the people at my table who they're not wanting to engage with the world and the verisimilitude. They don't see the game as something that is subcreative or beautiful or real. They want to basically do whatever they want, whenever they want, with no consequences. And it's a whole different discussion we should have. Alignment directs how you can feel about an event or action. Then you can expand that scene and really get into some good acting, storytelling, or role-playing going. Yes, even in improv, there are limits put on the scenes to direct the story. And that's all alignment really is. Now, I think Coville brought up a good point. It does help simplify the world into black and white. We are of the good alignments, therefore the things of the evil alignments are our enemies. I have lawful in my alignment, therefore in general I'm going to be opposed to those who want to tear down civilization. It's also a reason why, what do we call our characters most of the time? Well, we call them heroes. Call them adventurers. In Call of Cthulhu, they're investigators. In Savage Worlds, the wild cards are almost always linked to some sort of legion that is working to protect and save. We want to play the heroes. It's usually the default assumption. Even necessary evil where you are playing the bad guys. You are playing the bad guys who are forced to be the good guys. There's this idea that on the alignment scale, there are good alignments. There are evil ones. There are ones that we are encouraged to play. And there are ones that we are not. We could go and delve into the Jungian archetypes and shadow play. But at the end of the day, I think there is something for saying one of the beautiful things, and we talked about this in the beauty episode, right? One of the beautiful things about role-playing games is it allows us to take abstract concepts like actually standing up for what is right and put it in a box and observe it and say, well, I don't really have dragons to fight, but I have my own dragons to fight, right? G.K. Chesterton, the beauty of fairy tales it tells us that dragons are real. It tells us that dragons can be beaten. Yes, John Doom, that is one of my favorite quotes. Just because you are a bad guy does not mean you are a bad guy. So what I think, let's set all of that aside. Let's talk about playing evil characters. We've all done it. I've done it. One of my favorite characters from Out of the Abyss was a lawful evil warlock of the Nine Hells. There are some of us, we all go through this phase, I think, in gaming, where we want to play the chaotic evil, murderous a-hole. I have yet to hear of a game where evil, like if everyone's playing an evil character, where it doesn't eventually break down into PvP, the campaign doesn't get finished, and it's awful. There's one, let me rephrase that. Warlords of the Accord Lands is based off some guy's evil campaign. But again, how much constraints he put around it or not. We can talk about World of Darkness. I think most people still play World of Darkness. I have had very few experiences where a World of Darkness game didn't end up as Superheroes of the Night as opposed to a game of personal horror. Right? Even in Vampire, though, what is the main mechanic? And I would argue the main mechanic is not blood. The main mechanic of Vampire, the tentpole mechanic, is humanity and your struggle to retain your idea of personality. You do really get to know people on a different level when they play evil characters. I would agree with that, Tink. But I would also argue that while it is fun for a while, it doesn't tend to be the reason we engage with gaming. Again, there's a reason why I would argue that most of the games that we play, now there are outliers. You could argue Cult. You could argue Vampire. You could argue, honestly, Nephilim. Or as brilliant as that game design is, I really feel like, are you playing the good guys? I don't know. We all go through these phases. We all want to flirt with the darkness, but I think that it's the light that draws us back, not necessarily the darkness that enthralls us. Right? When we talk about our games, the sacrifice play is usually the story that sticks in our mind. That idea that greater love has no man than this, that he lays down his life for his friend. Those are the stories that we like to share. Those are the stories that we remember constantly going forward. So, coming back to heroic epic fantasy. What do we do with that? Well, I think a good start is to say, I'm not playing a modern person. I'm not playing me. I'm playing in a fantasy world where the gods exist. There are good gods, there are evil gods. There are lawful gods, there are chaotic deities. And again, if all of the world is created for a purpose in a fantasy world. In a pre-enlightenment, this is even the way that, I mean, trust me, I've studied a lot of the ancient Near East texts, and this is the way that things, work in the mindset of these people. They were created for a purpose. They were created to do something. Then alignment becomes something intrinsic, right? There are mechanics in the game built around it. Detect good and evil. Protection from good and evil. You go back a couple of editions and you have protection from damn near everything based off the alignment. Fiends. Devils exist. I would also argue that if you go back to the original origins of the game, what's very interesting is you didn't actually get to play anything but what we would call the free peoples, if we were talking Tolkienist, until pretty late in the game. Right? Book of Humanoids comes out at some point in the 2e cycle. In fact, the only non-free peoples race that you were able to play was a half-orc. And the argument there is that it is the inclusion of humanity that allows the freedom of choice. That humanity, as well as the other, dwarves and elves and gnomes, have a chance of free will, something that other species don't. And I'm not just talking about evil species. Those of lawful good don't have the free will to choose something else. If you go back to Tolkien and you look at all of the different, one of the things that Christopher Tolkien talks about is there are a lot of other views of where orcs came from. And in some of the original ones, they were evil spirits inhabiting, right? Orc comes from the same root as, I believe, demon or undead. Orcs weren't people. They were, to quote another Tolkien guy from Amansul, sort of a demonic incarnation. It's kind of terrifying. But even look at the elves in Tolkien. Even the dark elf Eöl never sided with Morgoth. None of the elves, even in the Battle of the Last Alliance, where they talk about people being on every side except the elves. The elves are good. They may not be good, but they never fall to Morgoth. Morgoth, the dark enemy, right? No. But it's not Calvinism, Restar. Calvinism is something completely different. I am not a Calvinist, so this is something about the ontological reality of beings in a fantasy world that is baked into their nature. So, be careful when you pick your alignment, especially if you're playing in my games. Especially if you are someone who channels divinity. I can't tell you, well, I probably could if I thought about it. At least 4 times, I've had players do something very egregious in their alignment to their alignment and found themselves as really crappy fighters until they atoned. I didn't take away player agency. They made choices. I gave them warnings. But if you're playing a cleric, you are playing somebody who draws power from this reality, who draws power from this purpose. And acting contrary to the purpose has consequences, much like paladins do, much like champions do. I love in Pathfinder 2 that they sort of embrace this. You have your list of anathemas, and if you do an anathema, bad things happen. I think players should be free to change their alignments. I also think GMs, you should point out to your players when their alignments are changing. Hey, X, Y, and Z has happened multiple times. Now, you may have noticed that in this whole discussion of alignment, I brought up other games. They have their own alignments. humanity for vampire. It sets the rules for the moral interactions in the games. Other games ignore them completely, and that's fine. I'm not saying these other games are bad. I'm just saying that if there is alignment, and there are a variety of different alignment systems. John Doom, I wish I had like an every Benny to give you, because that sums it up perfectly. Anytime you quote Rush on the channel, you get a prize, but that was such a perfect little nugget of truth in the chat. I appreciate that quite a bit. But other games, right? D&D's lingua franca. It started the whole trend. So we have these things in other games. Certified Organic brought up the Palladium system. Still has an alignment system. Principled, Scrupulous, Unprincipled, Anarchist, Miscreant, Aberrant, and Diabolic. Man, I still remember all of those. And it comes with a list of things you will and won't do. GURPS, Savage Worlds, these codes get built as hindrances that limit, or disadvantages in GURPS, that limit your character to act in certain ways, giving you a reward for saying, I will act in these certain ways. Call of Cthulhu is based off Lovecraft's writings, which are very humanistic and materialistic, so there is no alignment, and that's totally fair. But I don't think players or designers can get away from it. Because what do you inevitably play? You don't play as the Cthulhu cultist. You play as the people trying to preserve the world. It's a very lawful thing to do. So, that is the second argument for alignment. Next time we're going to talk about what things start to break down when we remove it. We're going to look at pulling alignment out of this fantasy system and what it does to the game, because I think things tend to break down. Selfishness and selflessness is a great way to look at these things. And honestly, I think Dante would agree that those two things kind of map to good and evil. So anyway, we'll be back on Tuesday with part 3 of our argument for alignment. If you want to hang out more, I will be on the PEG channel tonight at 7 Central. I believe is when we're going live. We're going to be talking about Fast, Fun, Furious February, a creator jam that ended up last month. There's some great stuff that came out of it. We're going to be talking with several of the creators. We're going to be reviewing the products. I'm pretty excited about it. Looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. Also, if you want, I will be in April running some Deadlands on Gaming with Gage, Gaming with Gage's and Friends Discord channel. I'll let everybody know when I put up the post. If you want to come play in a non-streamed, just hang out, play some Deadlands. I would love to run some games for people. I'm going to try and do 2 or 3 sessions. I know Tink is going to sign up for one. On his Discord channel. I would love to, yes, on Swan Night. John, hopefully we can play some Deadlands. I was talking with Gage, and he was talking about how a lot of people sign up to run for Swan, but they don't tend to have a lot of Deadlands. I'm like, well, why not? Let's play some Deadlands. I have a couple of one-sheets coming out that I may use as playtests on the Swan Network. Grom, if Mondays don't work, perhaps we can find another night to play some Deadlands. So, if you like what we do, please consider giving us a thumbs up on YouTube, subscribing on YouTube, subscribing here. If you are a fan of the Iconic Podcast, or even just the Iconic Production channel, if you would go over to Spotify or iTunes, leave us a rating, leave us a review on our podcast. It helps the algorithm in all of these places kind of say, hey, these are things that people are liking. Let's kind of push this towards the top of the stack. Thanks to Tink for doing that for us. Certified to Organic, I would love to play some Deadlands with you. Again, once I get the schedule signed up, I will post it on the Iconic Production Discord channel, and I will mention it here if you want to sign up and play some Deadlands with me. I am actually going to be running a Deadlands game on Monday night for Bob. We normally play D&D on Monday night, or Blackbirds. It's my good friend Bob Crumb's birthday on Monday, so if he happens to be here on Tuesday, wish him a happy birthday. I'm going to run some Deadlands for you guys. I'll let you know how it goes. And yeah, I will see you guys all on Tuesday for more Behind the Screens. John, I understand. It is I have to start things a little bit later just because of getting to be a dad, as Grom put it. Bob's birthday is one day after, apparently. So we will be wishing John Doom a happy birthday on Tuesday as well. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for taking this journey on alignment with me. I realize that it's just something I've wanted to talk about for a while, and I appreciate all of you being here. So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. This has been Behind the Screen. I am JM, and we will see you all later. Have a good one.